Today I'm going to tell you the tale of when I was a private in the Minnesota Army National Guard and how I prompted them, how I caused them, or how I was the cause of them changing their military policies and procedures. Buckle up, grab some chips, make yourself comfortable. Hopefully, it's an enjoyable tale. But first, I'm Dave. This is Old Dad Studio. Today is February 22nd, 2025. This is vlog number 53 in a row. We're doing the daily vlog run, and I want to thank you again for all of your encouragement, comments, subscriptions, everything along the way, all the views that I'm getting. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I'm having a blast here doing these daily vlogs. So today is going to be another personal one. I'm going to tell you the tale. Sometimes I title this story when I tell this story. I think this time I'm going to use the angle of I had them change, or I forced them to change their policies and procedures. A lot of times when I start telling this story, I'll say, I made a chaplain say the Effenheimer to me when I was in the military, and it was like at the top of his lungs screaming at me as he repeatedly said the Effenheimer. So hopefully one of those two has got you intrigued enough now to stay around and hear the tale. Couple of things about this story. Let me give you some background to set the stage here. I joined the Minnesota Army National Guard back in 1984. I actually signed the paperwork. I didn't go off to basic training until 1985 after I graduated from high school, and then I went and did my military communications school as well. So I was in Fort Leonard Wood, then I was in Fort Gordon, and then I came home to Minnesota, and I was here, and I did the normal Minnesota Army National Guard thing where you went 1 weekend a month and then 2 weeks in the summertime, and then I did do some special training while I was in the Minnesota Army National Guard, took some winter training and courses that I could, and had a good time with it. And this story is from one of the summer camps, either in 1987 or 1988. I couldn't remember the exact which one it was. It was one of those two early on in my military career. I was still a private at that time. And we were up north in northern Minnesota. There is a training facility here called Camp Ripley, and that's where usually the Minnesota Army National Guard trains at, and that's where we were, out in the middle of the woods. We were doing a simulated combat exercise where they had broken our battalion into two separate groups and we were fighting each other. Back then, I don't know if they still use it or not, but we had like laser tag on our uniforms, and so when somebody shot you, your laser tag would go off and you would know that you had gotten hit, and that's how they had accounted for casualties back and forth. For this particular story, in 1987-88, playing those war games, we were set up out in the woods out at Camp Ripley. They had broken us, like I said, they had broken us into two different groups. The group that I was in, we had created our headquarters of where we were going to run our command out of and set everything up and had camouflaged everything. And since I was part of the communication group, I was part of the headquarters. And since we were all set up, we started like nightly and daily perimeter guard duty and rotated that through the staff that was stationed there at the headquarters. And so we would walk the perimeter 24 hours a day, looking out for any enemy attacks that might happen. Now, we were about day 4 into our stay there at our headquarters, into the fighting and into the simulated war games, and we hadn't been attacked yet. And so we were kind of on edge. We were thinking it's going to come any time now. We're going to get hit. They're going to find out where we are. They're going to figure it out. And now on that 4th or 5th night, I was on guard duty with another friend of mine. Actually, the person who recruited me into the Minnesota Army National Guard. He was in my unit and also in the communication group. And we were on guard duty together. So we were walking the perimeter around that headquarters together. If you're not familiar with the military, and I don't know if they still do it or not, but back in the 80s, one of the pieces of equipment that they gave us was a flashlight. But the flashlight, it wasn't just like a normal flashlight that you click on and you have a light and the beam would go out. This flashlight, the body of it was tall. It had 2 D-sized batteries in it. So if you know what a D-sized battery is, you got 2 of those. But then it had a crooked neck. So it came up and then it went forward. And so it looked like kind of if you were to flip it on its side, it kind of looked like an L, or that shape of an L. And what that was designed for is you would take that flashlight and you would hook it onto your gear. You had what's called the web gear that you would wear, where all of your things could dangle and you could attach stuff to you. So you would clip it onto that web gear, and because it was L-shaped, the batteries were here, and then the lens came out this way, and you would put a red filter on that lens so it would cut the light down, and at nighttime it wouldn't be this big white bright light shining out for your enemy to see. It's a dulled red light that gives you just enough light right in front of you to see what's going on and really cuts down on the brightness. And so you'd have that flashlight attached to your gear, and then that also freed up your hands for your weapon, so you could still have your hands for your weapon. And while Joe and I were on our routine walk around the perimeter of headquarters, we spotted across the field a bunch of these little red dots coming at us, kind of bouncing around, coming towards us. Now that's a telltale sign that there's a bunch of people with web gear and military flashlights hooked to them coming at you, right? Because we can see all these little red dots. So we're like, oh, it's the attack. Tonight is the attack. And we're on guard duty, so we have to alert everybody of what's going on. What our plan is Joe was going to hightail it back to the headquarters and alert them that we were going to be under attack. And while he was off doing that, what I would do is I would take the illumination grenade that was issued to us for guard duty, and I would shoot that into the air over the field where those red lights were coming. So I would shoot the grenade up, it would illuminate the field, it opens up a little parachute, and then it comes down and it burns some chemical as it comes down, and it's very bright, and it'll illuminate that whole field. So I can illuminate everybody who's coming at us, and they will know that we know that they're there. That will hopefully stop the attack and give time for everybody else to come forward. That was our plan. I pull out the illumination grenade. Joe hightails it back towards the headquarters. Now, the one that I had, it had some kind of foil top on it that you had to take off, so I peeled off the top on that, and then there was another safety mechanism on the bottom that you had to peel off, and now you had a tube, and it had a firing pin at the bottom then that once you had that safety off, you could punch it or hit it, and that pin would then ignite the charge that would send the flare up into the air for the parachute to open and everything to happen. And so I had that with me. I opened the top, I opened the bottom, I held it out and kind of pointed it in the general direction of where I thought it would go to be over the field. And I went boom. And when I hit that thing, of course, the firing pin went off into the air. The problem was, I was standing under a really, really large oak tree. And I didn't realize it at the time because it was really dark. And I thought I was out on the edge of the perimeter outside of this little grove that we had set up our headquarters in, because there was a lot of trees and things around, but we were walking the perimeter on the outside. And I was kind of in the middle of a road where you would come and go from that headquarters. And it had overgrown trees on that road. I thought I was out far enough where I was past those trees. I was not. And so when I hit that and it went up into the air, it hit one of those branches in the oak tree. I'm going to stop here and say nobody was hurt, or no people or animals were hurt in what's about to ensue. Okay, so it fired off, hit a branch in the tree, and kind of did the ping pong ball thing where it won't, it goes ding, 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 ding. It did that a couple of times and then came straight back into our camp. That rocket sizzled past me and hit a Jeep. Now these are the old style Jeeps. These are the Jeeps before the Hummers, right? So these are the Vietnam era Jeeps is what we had then in the 80s for the Minnesota Army National Guard. And it hit into a Jeep. Now, when it hit that Jeep, it went down behind the front and passenger seats of the Jeep and started bouncing around on the inside, doing like a circle, going inside that Jeep. Also inside that Jeep, was the chaplain, who happened to be sleeping there. He had taken one of those canvas gurneys, like you would have if you were going to carry a patient, where the wooden handles on this end and that end, and it was all canvas. He had taken one of those and set it on the back of his Jeep. And that's where he had basically made his bunk for the night. So he had his bed there and was laying in his bed. Now, thank goodness, he didn't get burned. The flare did not hit him at all. It just sizzled past him, hit the Jeep, bounced down into the bottom of the Jeep, did the spinning thing around and around and around. Now, that started the Jeep on fire. But as soon as it got to the point where it went, and the chemical that burns the light in the sky to illuminate the field started happening, well, that got really hot. And one of the things we were all afraid of is if you know the design of those old Jeeps, the gas tank for the Jeep is right underneath the driver's seat. So when you were putting gas in it, you would get out and the top for the gas, you just twist it off right by the driver's seat and you would fill it up and then you would twist it back on and you were basically in the driver's seat sitting on the tank of gas for the Jeep. And here's this illumination flare, very, very hot, spinning around right behind that driver's seat. And then when it pops and the illumination starts, here it's illuminating that Jeep and it's burning it at the same time. The seats melted. The steering wheel melted. Any of those plastic parts, the shift knob melted. The dash melted. Luckily, it didn't explode. It didn't hit anything to do with the gas tank, anything to do with the fuel. And in the end, I was very, very lucky that the Jeep, it didn't explode. But it did burn all of the plastic components of that Jeep. Anything that was plastic that was in or around the cab, the front seats, the back seats, everything, it all melted away. So there was nothing left but this metal husk of pieces and parts in the Jeep. And when that flare whizzed past the chaplain in his Jeep, that's when he jumped out of his Jeep. And the first words out of his mouth was, "Who the Effenheimer just did that?" And then went on a complete tirade of all kinds of four-letter words that shall not be reused here on the YouTube channel. So now we've got a Jeep on fire. We've got a screaming, swearing chaplain. We've got red dots coming at us from across the field, and we've got Joe over in headquarters telling them there's attack on, but they now are seeing the commotion that's happening out here, so everybody is just scrambling, running out here to where I am and where the Jeep is. Of course, we're all pulling fire extinguishers and trying to put this thing out and get control of the Jeep that is on fire and melting with this illumination grenade. Funny enough, all of that commotion and that Jeep being on fire, it stopped the attack. So the people that were coming across the field, all the little red dots that we saw, they decided that whatever chaos was ensuing on our side, that it probably was a safety hazard of some kind or something was happening, and they were not going to add to it because this was a training war game situation. So they stopped the attack. They all retreated. We were able to then focus on the Jeep and the fire and getting everything contained. Like I said, nobody was hurt. No people, no animals, just a Jeep. The Jeep pretty much was ruined. Now that whole night, I was scared out of my mind. I mean, not only did I feel bad that this had happened, I felt horrible that I had made this mistake, but I was scared out of my mind that the military is now going to charge me with an Article 15 or do who knows what, because this incident happened and I destroyed military property. Now, as it turns out, here's where the policy change or the policy shift comes into effect for the Minnesota Army National Guard. At that time, we had grenade training once a year. It covered all aspects of all kinds of grenades, and that was supposed to be sufficient. And the policy change that happened going forward, before they hand out any of those illumination grenades to be used during training exercises in basically what's considered live fire, you have to do a refresher course. And everybody has to get trained on what the correct use and deployment of those illumination grenades are, and one of those things is not to be standing underneath a tree when you deploy it. And so the next morning, rather than me receiving an Article 15 or getting into all kinds of crazy trouble for destroying that Jeep, what ended up happening is our entire unit got training on the use and deployment of illumination grenades. So they decided to go and change the training then rather than charge me. All right, there you have it. The story of how I made a chaplain say the Effenheimer at me, how I changed Army policy, and how I didn't get an Article 15. That's it for today. I will see you tomorrow.